changes in the text. But what we have here is the constitutional right to freedom, the right to personal liberty, says that no person shall be deprived of their liberty, their personal liberty, unless provided by law. And it goes into 10 different scenarios where your personal liberty can be deprived in accordance to law. So if it is now that the government is the government's judgment that there is a danger to this society, where there is clear evidence that persons who have been charged with murders have already been released on bail, persons who have been murdered in this country were recently released on bail, then it is the duty of the government to address that. And that is what one of the main changes to the Barbadian law as it relates to bail, that this bill purports to bring into force, addresses. And Mr. President, I said that I wanted to address a number of questions, and I know that time is limited, and so perhaps I should get to those questions. So that is the state of the law as it relates to bail. We have a Bail Act. It makes provisions for bail. Now, there has been 2 amendments to the Bail Act since it was first introduced in Barbados. 2 amendments. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the amendments, or I should say the first amendment, this act came into force in 2001. The present act. And it was amended to make sure that a person charged with murder could only get bail on an application before a high court judge. It therefore took away the right to apply for bail in the magistrate's court, or what people call the lower court. Could only go before the high court for murder. And there was this concomitant practice where people hardly ever got bail for murder in Barbados. When it first came to the bar more than 2 decades ago, there was no practice, there was no issue in the country of a person being charged with murder ever getting bail. Yeah. But we've had a situation where Barbados has carried out its criminal justice system with 2 judges. Because when it came to the bar, there were only 5 high court judges. 2 sat in the high court doing criminal matters. And we used to have assizes. Fellas blow the trumpet to start the October assizes, the January assizes, the April assizes, and going down the road and things begin. And at the end of those assizes, the criminal court shut, but the civil court judges were still working. That is the system that we started, that I started in. But the crime in the country was not waiting on the assizes. And it was only up to 2018 that we moved from 2 criminal courts in high courts. And it always boggled my mind that when I read a West Indian law report, you saw judges in Trinidad, all these judges, 30-something, 40-something judges, Jamaica the same thing. And the criminal division has 20 judges. But in 2018, we were only dealing with 2. You want to know why we have a backlog of 1,600 now? We want to know why a man who was charged with a shooting case in 2011 is before the courts last week? Because we only were dealing with 2 judges. And this is not to blame anybody, because one of the things we as Barbadians have to accept is that, and I think the late Professor, the Right Honorable Wayne Arthur used to say this, we will always be victims of our own successes. We had a criminal justice system, an education system, a public service, police, everything that worked well, and Barbados was a beacon, a leader in the Caribbean. But we felt that these things could not be changed. And when these systems ran their natural courses, we felt Barbadians are totally resistant to any change at all. So what we had in the country, Mr. President, was a situation where crime was rampant, escalating in scope. The nature of crime has changed. 2 criminal courts. Some will argue that the increase to 5 and then the increase to 8 might be insufficient given the level of the backlog. But if you move to 8 now, then we say the civil judges now need more help, need more resources. And it's really and truly, when you're sitting in that seat, only so much resources that you can throw to all the problems that the countries face. It is therefore a balancing act. Now, one of the challenges that we have faced, Mr. President, is that Parliament, the government in its judgment in 2019 said, look, this is how we can fix this problem. Can't have a man getting gunned down in a shopping mall in the full glare of the public where he just get released on bail and was on a murder charge. We don't know for a fact. It may be a retaliatory, it may be gang related, we don't know. But this kind of thing shocked the conscience of the society. And the government said, look, this is how we can deal with it. If you are charged with a firearm-related offense, murder, treason, or high treason, you cannot apply for bail. Some of the boys was right. Some said from the outset that it will be challenged and maybe challenged successfully. But I want to say this to the Honorable Senate. This is a parliamentary institution, the Senate. We are one arm of government. And don't fear, and it is not, as Senator Watson suggested, that there's arrogance on the part of the government. I want to say this as a practicing lawyer, sir. I hope, at the risk of being labeled immodest, I understand what it is to bring actions before the court to strike down laws of Barbados. And since this country has become a republic, I have on 2 occasions represented litigants who have got laws in Barbados struck down, even as part of this government. I don't feel any parliamentary weight on me for being able to represent the interests of people in doing so. So there's no arrogance on the part of the government. But what I want to say that in looking at the context of the separation of powers, it is the province of the parliament to pass the laws, to achieve the balance between the interests of the accused person who has a right to due process before the courts and the interests of the community who's affected by the crime. The interests of the community which may be affected not only by the depravity of the circumstances of the crime, but ensuring that that person who is charged gets their day in court and the victims of that crime get the opportunity to get justice. That has to be balanced. And who balances it? It has to be Parliament. And parliaments across the world in the democratic systems of governance that we have will not always get it right. The courts determine whether you get that balance right without the court itself saying where the balance should be drawn. Because then the judges will be accused of dealing with the political, macro-political, macro-social, macroeconomic issues that are not the province for judges. You hear those criticisms in other countries. You hear them in the US all the time, how the courts are political. But in our system, sir, there is no reticence on the part of a government for saying, look, we are going to address the crime in this way. And if we have got it wrong, we respect the decisions of the court. This Barbados Labour Party, the Labour Party, as Senator Tate likes to hear, is not the party that said when the court ruled against it that we will pull Barbados out of the Caribbean Court of Justice and accuse the judges as politicians wearing robes. Not the Barbados Labour Party. We appealed the decision of the High Court judge, and in reading the decision of Lamar Jones, as I have to do, the court said, 1, a law enacted under Section 49 of the Constitution to make changes to the provisions for the grant of bail is perfect. Government can do that. Even without changing, or as you should say, I don't want to say bush lawyers, the non-lawyers in the community would say amending the Constitution. But the text hasn't changed, so it creates problems in their minds. But that is a problem for another day. But even where you have amended the Constitution with the constitutional majority, it is still the province of the judiciary to determine whether that constitutional amendment is constitutional. And I want to say this, for those of you jumping up saying the government get liquor, it is the first time in Barbados that a constitutional amendment has ever been held to be unconstitutional by the courts. It has only happened in the Commonwealth Caribbean on 3 occasions in one country, in Belize. It is something that is new to the jurisprudence. And one of the questions is whether or not, having satisfied the requirements of the constitutional mandated majority, whether it's still the province of the courts to rule something that is unconstitutional. It is this something new, this is something novel. In other words, when a law is inconsistent with the Constitution, it can be the Constitution itself, it's no question that is no baffling legal scholars right now. So that this amendment that we brought in 2019 that was struck down by the court, and when you read the decision of the court bemoaned the fact, I want the evidence that motivated government's intent. It was not put before the court, and this is not to put shame on the lawyers who argued the case for government. The Court of Appeal admitted that evidence on appeal. The statements from Parliament, the Attorney General, evidence from the Commissioner of Police showing the commission of these crimes, because in assessing the proportionality of the law, the court wanted to see what motivating factors, so the court can assess whether the balance was struck by the legislature. So what we have here is this notion that a parliament must be perfect in all its work. No, it is the judgment of the legislative branch of government in a democracy to draw that balance by way of the Constitution or by any laws that are implicated by constitutional change. And it is for for the courts to assess whether that balance has been struck. So that was government's response. So looking around the region, Trinidad amended their Bail Act and said that you cannot get bail for murder. They put it in the act. The Privy Council struck it down. Why? This is a very simple point. The decision to grant or withhold bail is a judicial decision. Parliament, you can make any law you want. You can set all the conditions that the courts must look at to grant bail and all the conditions that the court should look at to refuse bail. You can add more to them. But you cannot take away that decision-making power of the court. It is not a legislative power. It is a judicial power. So that was the basis on which the Privy Council struck down the Trinidadian Amendment. This government did not go there. What did the government do, Mr. President? The government looked at the legislation in the Republic of South Africa. And what we have done in relation to the serious crimes of murder, treason, high treason, and firearm offenses is to put a condition. You can get your bail, yes, but you have to demonstrate special or exceptional circumstances to allow you to get bail. So that what is implicated by the constitutional change that is contemplated in this amendment is that this is not a law that adds to the aforementioned 10 conditions that exist. So there is no textual amendment to the Constitution. Mr. President, a number of concerns have been raised. I don't know if time will permit me to address them. One I heard outside of this chamber, Mr. President, I wish, not challenging your judgment, that I could be like Senator Tate and Senator Watson and Senator Thompson, but there may be some commonality with them that I do not share. But sir, the first thing
the commonality is that you all have 30 minutes. They all have 30 minutes, and that's the commonality.
Mr. President, I heard about an attack on the Constitution. I heard about taking a shot at the Constitution wrongfully and all these things. Which third-tier appellate court in the world does hear bail hearings? Which one? Does the Caribbean Court of Justice presently determine whether a person should get bail? Did the Privy Council before? I went out to the chair, chat with my colleagues in Trinidad and Jamaicans, colleagues and Grenadians haven't responded yet. Which, because I've never seen a decision of the United Kingdom Privy Council determining whether somebody was wrongfully denied bail by a magistrate or a judge. The jurisdiction of the Third Tier Appellate Court is prescribed in law. And if you check our Caribbean Court of Justice Act, it sets out a right to appeal, appeals as a right, and appeals with leave. And I didn't want to quieten this thing that the government is so wicked and we taking away appeals from the Caribbean Court of Justice. First thing you teach here in law is understand the jurisdiction of the court. Or understand the jurisdiction of the court. But I have never read a Privy Council decision, or does the United States Supreme Court give decisions on people who get bail? They have a grand jury. But all this political theater to excite people that the government is so wicked that we taking away. Oh, good dear, I'm reading the Caribbean Court of Justice Act. Come on. And this is not to say that if the issue of the constitutionality of the actions, at the end of the day, the Caribbean Court of Justice is the arbiter, the final arbiter of its own jurisdiction. So even if Parliament says the appeal at the level of the Court of Appeal shall be final, that's what Parliament said. That's what Parliament said. The Caribbean Court of Justice will be the final. In fact, look, I was part of an appeal, Mr. President, where the bail was refused. And the accused person appealed. And one of the arguments of the government is that you don't appeal refusals of bail in Barbados. All you do is apply in another 3 months to see if you get a different judge. And the Court of Appeal said, constrain the legislation. You can't government went to the Caribbean Court of Justice, the Caribbean Court. But you know what happened? There is a right to appeal a refusal of bail. But the criminal lawyers at the criminal bar don't avail themselves of that decision. You want to know why? Why am I appealing this decision when my client ain't get bail when the rules and the law provides that I can apply again? But you don't want to make it sound that the government is trampling on people's rights. There is, I could be wrong, Mr. President, and I quote my good friend late Smokey Brown, and I'm wrong regularly. But I do not see any third-tier appellate court in the world making decisions as to whether a person should get bail or not. In fact, when you look at the Privy Council said to Jamaica and the rest of the Caribbean that still using them, we can put you all through a sufficiency test because they got certain questions that coming up to us that really and truly should be dealt with your lower courts. We only want to deal with the big matters, right? Only if you were the chair. So that if there are any offending provisions in this act, Mr. President, the suggestion was that the whole bill, because we repeal and replace the whole bill, has to go through the act. But something tells me that when you're in first year law and legal systems, I think Senator Boyce might correct me, or any two Senator Boyces, that there's something called severance. So the first thing the court has to do is to determine whether the offending provision can be severed, and if, by way of severing it, if the whole thing falls apart without it. Hardly could be that there could be no law as it relates to the bill. But in any event, the Constitution gives you the right to be released on conditions or unconditionally. So I'm looking at Senator Tate because I cannot help looking at my friend, my big sister, Mr. President, but I'm not referring to anything that she has said. So that this bill requires no, you go down to the magistrate's court, the policeman say, I'm objecting the bill on the grounds. This is a serious case, and the accused man is likely to interfere with witnesses, and the accused man, we can't sure if he come back to court. Can't do that now. Can't do that now. You gotta give reasons. You gotta bring evidence. And, Mr. President, permit me to deal with one last point. There was this notion that because a recused person must now bring exceptional circumstances to show why he should get bail, is now a reversal of the presumption of innocence. The very Constitution in Barbados, Section 18 says that you can reverse the presumption of innocence. But that is not the reversal of the legal burden of the state to prove that the person is guilty. Because we're not dealing with a trial. This is not the trial, but this is a reversal of an evidential burden. So where the state sets the evidence where you should not get bail, you can show that I got rock solid alibi. I wasn't even in Barbados at the time. You can bring your evidence. It's a reversal, and this is only in relation to the sufficiency of the bail hearing at that stage, not the criminal trial. So there's no reversal of the presumption of innocence on a legal standard or the legal burden. It is only the evidential burden at the bail hearing. And constitutional courts all over the world have said that there is the Strasbourg jurisprudence of the European Human Rights Court of Justice has also determined in its several judgments that on the question of bail, this is not a criminal matter. It is not the determination of the criminal matter. I know that everybody has not had the opportunity to do it, but it's the judgment of the government, sir, that we can't have a lax attitude with AR-15 rifles and M16 and Uzi and all kind of thing and big Glock and big gun about the place and men in social media. Terrorizing the community, that is a new provision of this bill. Shock and outrage. Imagine a judge hearing the evidence of the prosecution and saying, well, look, I bill. No, Parliament has the right to say that the judge must take these factors into consideration, and if those factors are present, but the evidence placed before it, it can't get bail. But that is a legitimate denial of the personal liberty that any accused person will have. It is not an illegitimate denial. It is for a reasonable purpose in a society. So, let me get real, sir. Let me get real. Bill does not say, I will not put no, sir. Bill does not require these provisions in the bill that hopefully will be passed into law. Yes, they will be tested, and I say that we're not necessarily perfect. Yeah, no, perfect. No, nothing is perfect. But the government is, in its judgment, saying this is where we need to go. We have looked at all of the relevant constitutional tests, and this is the one that does not take away any jurisdiction of the court. The decision to grant bail still resides in the judge. The circumstances where you can or cannot get bail are prescribed by law, and decisions have to be made. Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I will support this bill because I know in my heartest of hearts that there's no violence to the Constitution of Barbados. The Constitution of Barbados is necessarily implicated in any determination to refuse a person bail. To you, I'm much obliged, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Nichols. Speakers? Senator Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will not roll with the heavy roller, sir, and I don't have any legal opinions. But, sir, this bail amendment, sir, and we focus in both houses on not treason and high treason, merely on surge and firearm crime. And we seem to have failed to mention its impact on our healthcare system and all the delays and the resources that it consumes. I support the bill, sir. But the bill deals with matters after the fact. It deals with matters after the crime has been committed. And I want to hear more about what we're doing, sir, to stop the inflow. I know that when Senator Cummings was the minister in charge of port, chairman in charge of the port, she was instrumental in having the scanners brought back into order, and there appeared to be successes in stopping the flow. And there have been statements made about the sources of the firearms, and various persons have pointed towards the north. Sir, all or most of the firearms that carry markings can be traced. So I have every confidence that whether it is spoken in public or not, that tracing is going on. And not only those who are caught here, but those who are caught in other places will be punished. Because in most places in the world, export and import of firearms requires licensing. Now, I don't remember which senator, sir, spoke about sources and importation, but the senator, I think it was Senator Drakes, did not differentiate between legal importation and illegal importation. And I would be particularly disturbed, sir, if we banned all legal importation, because the police and the defense force and others, sir, are required, sir, and need to have access to legal importation, even only if for sporting purposes. But there needs, sir, to be more analysis of the consumption, sir, of ammunition. And I repeat, sir, guns of all types without ammunition are hammers. You can't use them. Hammers. You can't use them for anything else. So maybe, sir, the government needs to focus more on chasing, in addition to chasing the guns, to chase the ammunition. But leaching, sir, it's easier to leach ammunition than to leach guns. Now, leaching is where you have a source of something. Well, you might have a big water tank at your house filled with water, and there's a little leak, and it slowly exits, and one day you come and find it empty. And then you say, but my driveway isn't wet, but it's just been slowly evaporating. And that's what happens, sir, with leaching. But, sir, all of the legally imported firearms and ammunition should be and are traceable. And the biggest importer, I believe, of ammunition in this country, sir, are the sporting organizations. But the law requires that all of these sporting organizations keep meticulous records of who it's sold to and when it is sold to, and their declarations about what you have done with it. I do not know if the information is analyzed when it's handed in monthly, but the data is there. Sir, if illegal ammunition is coming in, then there needs to be training of the persons who search for it. You could get caught up searching for guns and looking for guns, but what you need to look for, sir, is the ammunition. And maybe there needs to be more manpower assigned to searching for ammunition. Sir, some time ago, I spoke about the work that the Barbados Police Service has been doing in reducing the number of legal and illegal guns on the island. And they've been doing destruction of firearms, and it is monitored very closely, and is monitored by international agencies. Now, the Barbados Police Service can't work alone. But the citizens of the country have to provide information, sir, when they believe certain things are happening. I'm not suggesting that you go on brass tacks and call your name and say what you've seen. And I'm sure that there are channels through which certain information can be passed to the police to deal with some of the problems that are happening, sir. Now, my last point, sir, is about something that leaves me frustrated. I do not remember how many firearms amnesties they've had. And there is the belief out there that persons who hold illegal firearms will not surrender them if there's an amnesty. And that is probably true. And it probably is because if you hold an illegal firearm and you surrender it, and you have to document who you are, if that firearm is then shown to have been used in a crime, you might have to answer some questions about it. But if you have an amnesty only for ammunition, sir, any live ammunition turned in could not have been used in a crime. So you could ask people to turn in the ammunition. The owners of the ammunition might not turn it in, but the occupants of the house might. And every round of ammunition that you get is potentially a life saved. So I would like to encourage the government, with all the pleadings, to contemplate having an ammunition amnesty. It doesn't need lots of provision. It doesn't need declarations. It just needs a safe place to deposit it where people can't access it, sir. Now, sir, last but not least, there continues to be a lot of hype on social media, I'm told, with persons displaying their possessions. I think they should continue to do it, because if they continue to do it, sir, we know who they are. So I'm not going to discourage people from doing it. I think everyone who owns something should probably display it on social media. But the authorities that are charged with dealing with such issues have to have all the resources and the leeway, sir, to deal with the issues, legally deal with the issues. I don't want to stand here and encourage any illegal activity on the part of law enforcement. But they need to have all the resources, sir, intelligence, sir, and all the equipment and resources they need for their own safety, sir. Sir, it would be a pity if this little rock that we have, this beautiful little rock, becomes like some other places in the world. Sir, in my younger days, I lived in a country not too far from here, and I was horrified that every window and door in the house that I live in had a wrought iron. I'm a little bit claustrophobic. And yeah, and I often fear that if there was ever a fire in the house and you got a bit disoriented, or you couldn't get to the room that had the locks on the burglar bars, you can get it open, what would happen to you? So I had a habit of getting up several times and checking that all the stoves are off and the iron was unplugged. And I would hate to see Barbados come to that, sir, where your dog can't come in your house because there's a big grill on the door. And we all have to have additional expense and maintenance at our houses because we fear that somebody's going to break into your house and do you harm with a firearm. I support the bill, sir, because I do not believe, sir, that what we have seen where persons who have been charged and held in prison have been released and have committed further crimes of a similar nature while they're on bail. And I think that the government is doing the right thing in that regard. I will let the legal luminaries deal with the issues, sir, in the bill. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Mr. Lynn. Her Honor, Senator Thompson.
Mr. President, when a government is faced with a serious national problem, it is the responsibility of the government to respond rapidly, to respond effectively, to respond to give assurance to citizens and those looking on, and to respond in the name of justice for all those who cannot act in and on their own behalf. Before I elaborate on this, I just want to make the point that that is what this administration is attempting to do. It is acting in the protection of the nation and society at a time when there is a challenge in relation to criminal activity that warrants, demands, and necessitates action on the part of the government. I deviate merely to make the point in response to one made earlier that one does not disclose, we were called on to disclose the national security plans. If national security plans are disclosed, are put in the public domain, then there are no longer security plans, they are mocked in. So really that call was a sort of nonsense call that cannot be taken seriously because there is no national security plan. There is not even a home security plan that can be put in the public domain if it is to be treated as a security matter. I go on from there, sir. The role of the courts is to give justice to citizens, to deal with those who are aggrieved, affected, or executing activities that impact others or impact society. The role of the criminal justice system is to dispense justice. And justice then is defined as maybe the conviction or other penalization of those who have committed crimes. It may be finding closure for the victims or the families of victims, rather. It may be saying to the society that our system allows and treats everybody fairly and that they are entitled to justice, whichever side of the spectrum they are on. It is giving a sense of security to all citizens who must live, work, and have recreation in the space that we define as the national space. There is therefore, sir, within the criminal justice system and within criminal law, always an inherent tension. A tension that on one hand seeks to protect the rights of the citizen and the society, and on the other considers what are the rights and freedoms of the individual when accused of a crime of any seriousness. Minor seriousness, like taking up a bag of mangoes that don't belong to them, or extreme seriousness in the case of taking of the life. The criminal law, therefore, has various functions to punish the guilty, to deter criminal activity, and in fact, sometimes the punishment for an offense is set to deter others from even contemplating, replicating, or repeating such acts. To give justice to the harmed or the aggrieved or their relatives, to rehabilitate or give opportunity, because often the justice system, in an attempt to prevent recidivism and to help young offenders, will put sentences in place or give RDs, reprimand and discharges, to give would-be or young offenders opportunities at rehabilitation, at taking a different road. It may ask for counseling or for social intervention or intervention from the social services. You may not go to a penal institution, but may go to an institution where there can be rehabilitation and counseling and other kinds of activities, or you may be asked in some way to pay society back by doing some kind of social activity or community-based activity. The intention of the criminal law is to save society from harm and from the egregious acts of nefarious persons. So the tension in the criminal law balances that. The right of an accused person, where the attorney goes into court, certainly in the days that I practiced criminal law, and has to seek bail many years ago. So I was admitted to the bar in 1987, where don't try to do the math, where the attorney goes into the court and says, my client is not known to the courts. My client is a working man. My client is a family man. My client has no passport, so cannot flee the jurisdiction. My client has a passport and is willing to surrender it. An allegation of wrongdoing is not itself a conviction. So the fact that the person is charged means that they are entitled to bail still, because they have no previous convictions and no taint or stain on their character. And so you would make all of these kinds of pleadings with the court and get bail for individuals. And I'm sure that a lot of the arguments have not changed over time, except that, as the Honorable Senator Nichols pointed out, years ago, you never got bail for serious criminal offenses, and definitely not for capital offenses. You knew that even when the person was on remand for 18 months, for 24 months, once they were charged with murder, they were staying put. Now, it became a travesty where after 24 months and that case was heard, the person who by this time had lost their job, the woman gone off with another man, the children don't speak to them and so on, is then acquitted. And all of that is part of the history of what happened as the court process worked itself out. But let us look, sir, at how times have changed, and therefore see the government's response to the change that we are seeing in society in the context of that change. And we can take, for example, a case that has been cited repeatedly today, the murder in Sheraton Center. I remember being in New York at the time, and my sense of utter shock. I could not believe what I was hearing. And when you broke it down, a person who was charged with murder but was on bail was shot and killed in Sheraton Center in the food court in front of old men, old ladies, little children, all kinds of people, workers, people having their lunch, people pass through going to floor to pay a bill, etc., etc. Shot and killed by another person who was also accused of murder and out on bail. And that was not singular. That repeatedly you see these persons who are charged with multiple murders getting bail and being released back into society to continue their behavior because they keep getting charged with more and more offenses. Now let us look, sir, at how this particular, and I put that in the context of what the government is attempting to do in the case where our behaviors, value systems, and approaches to crime and criminal behavior, and even our perception of crime has changed. The government is now saying that where there are firearm offenses and where there are murder accused, that in certain contexts, sir, in certain circumstances, you have a right to bail, yes, but you will not be allowed bail. If you are already charged with killing somebody and you come before the courts with another murder case where you are caught with an AK-47, you will have people now posing on social media with automatic weapons. So if you get caught with one of those, or you commit a crime with one of those, do not expect to walk about and terrorize people. Government has to take some measures to deal with what we are seeing in this society and to deal with it firmly and effectively so that people who are known hitmen or alleged to be hitmen, and people in society are able to identify them. People who are known to be drug dealers and the leaders of gangs, people who are repeat and violent and unrepentant offenders, people who have committed multiple murders or at least are multiple murder accused, people who terrorize communities cannot expect to continue behaving in that way without being brought to heel and put behind bars while their cases are pending. It is a protective mechanism that government is putting in place. And we can talk about procedure, we can talk about amendments, we can try to extrapolate it and direct it to other areas of law. The reality is that government cannot duck its responsibility. It cannot abdicate its responsibility to the citizen for fear that somebody might bring this on appeal, for fear that it may be struck down, for fear that we are using incorrect process, for fear that it might affect some other legislation. Something has to be done to address criminal activity in this country in the most serious way, and that is what the government is attempting to do. Where public order and public safety are threatened, that's what the legislation says. Where the act or offense will induce shock or outrage. And it is amazing to me that a former Attorney General who was neutered when it came to performance of his job, under whom we saw the campus trends and the Kadooment Day murders, is now having a lot to say about how to solve crime when he was completely neutered in terms of his own performance as an Attorney General. But this government is saying that bail has to be refused where you have multiple criminal charges pending, that where you are using firearms and so on, that and where there are murders, something has to be done, and we believe that this is it. Sir, there are ways in which I believe this particular legislation will affect in a positive way what is happening at the level of the society. I think, first of all, that it will strengthen the hands of the Barbados Police Service, many of whom work trying to bring these criminals to justice. It gives them a greater sense of security that these criminals are taken off of the street, that they don't have to face them every day. It gives the police a greater sense of security, that the government is serious about protecting them in doing their job. Can you imagine what it is like as a police officer to investigate a person for weeks or months, to investigate a murder, putting your own life at risk for the society, have the person before the courts, and then they are given bail, and you have to walk around and try to solve other murders, face them on the streets? It gives security to the police in doing their job. It gives security to them and strengthens their hand in protecting the society. It gives a sense of greater security to the families of those who have been gunned down or stabbed up or chopped up. You cannot feel good as a Barbadian, as a human being, if you are walking the streets in your community and the person who murdered your relative or your loved one, your father, your friend, your lover, you know they murdered them. It's not out on bail walking about and passing you and saying, "Morning, love," because there are people who have that kind of attitude. It gives a sense of security and safety to witnesses. We wonder why it is people do not come forward to give evidence to the police. But if somebody commits a murder and I am a witness, and they are going to come out on bail and be standing up and watching me, and they don't have to say a word. They only have to stand up and fold their hands and cock their head on the side, because their message is, "But I hear, and you know the body that you give a witness about that already, so unless you want to join them." It sends a message. It creates fear. When these criminals are walking around the society and the communities, the people who live in those communities, who are aware of who they are, what they do, and that they do it with impunity, are not going to come forward unless they feel they have some measure of protection. Unless they feel we are serious about removing the criminals off the street and out of the society. This legislation will help to give that level of security to families, to potential witnesses, and to witnesses in matters. It protects the wider society. And let me locate what the government is doing here today in the context of wider policy initiatives. The government is in the process of moving the Barbados Police Service from 1,250 officers to 1,500, which they consider to be the ideal number. The last recruitment had in a larger number of officers than previously. I think it was increased by 60 or to 60 or something. I don't have the exact number. But the idea is that we will increase the recruitment of people as police officers until you get up to the ideal component. We have increased the equipment and improved the equipment with which police officers worked. Improved vehicles. It was not so long ago when you called the police station when they were telling things, "We ain't got in the car, can't get there." Or, "Well, we will come tomorrow because Sergeant Smith out with the car, he coming back tomorrow morning." Nonsense like that. So something as basic as giving the police proper police stations to operate from, vehicles that they can do their work, computers, and tablets and other electronic equipment that they can do their work. We recognize that policing isn't just the presence of a body or of an officer, but that they need technology. We've improved camera access across the country. And very often now you see that cameras are used, or you hear that cameras were used to capture particular images of criminal activity taking part at a particular place. In fact, on social media, you see cameras picking up persons attempting to break into houses. We saw a shooting on social media where one person attempted to run while another was shot and so on. All of this picked up by cameras, and the number of cameras available to the police has been increased by this administration. And the technology available to the police has been increased. We have also improved their terms and conditions to give them more comfort and their families more comfort, and to incentivize them in doing their jobs, because the police have complained for a long time that they are not well remunerated in the context of what they do for a living. We have increased the number of judges hearing criminal cases from 2 to 8, quadrupled the number in a 6-year period. We have accelerated, therefore, the hearing of the backlog of cases, of criminal cases. We have increased the hearing of the number of criminal cases in the system. We have put in place mentorship and youth programs. There is a new youth program to try to keep some of our young men and young women on track and out of criminal activity, out of the hands of the gangs. Another important initiative which this government undertook was to ensure that people continue to get education by paying for access to the University of the West Indies by all of those people who were being cut off by the previous administration. And we know that education, access to jobs, creates opportunity, creates income, creates upward social mobility, and reduces the impact of crime. We have ensured that there are scanners at both the airport and the seaport to reduce the number of guns coming in through the ports. But let us be real. Barbados is an island with a coastline that is fairly large when you think of its size. And you can land guns at any point on any dark beach when there is no full moon, and it will be difficult to catch you. So while we have strengthened the scanning capacity and the screening capacity in the airport and the seaport, it is possible that guns are still coming in, being landed at various points on the coast rather than through the legitimate ports. As we explore this issue of crime, however, and I think that when we talk about crime, when we talk about what the government is doing, that this is not and cannot and should not be seen as a sort of knee-jerk reaction when I have laid out the kinds of initiatives systematically with social interventions, interventions in the justice system, interventions in the educational system, interventions with youth, interventions in our social fabric, that shows that the government has taken a multidisciplinary and multi-pronged approach to addressing crime at every level. There is also the peace program. People criticize it, but the reality is that its main thrust is to go into communities, identify where there are challenges, identify those persons who have been engaging in or engaged in criminal activity, and try to take them out. of that kind of lifestyle, and that has to be commended. The government has announced that if churches are willing to have community-based programs for young people that removes them off the streets, that takes them out of the hands of drugs or gang dealers or gangs, that it is willing to support those programs, and in fact, some churches have already benefited from financial support from the government to execute social-based programs for youth, for young people, intended to give them alternative lifestyles, intended to give them skills and training that can allow them to learn, to earn, to feel proud of themselves for having a skill that they can show off and earn from. But the reality is, sir, that people have come out of COVID with a lot of anger. And there are now a lot of people suffering with mental health issues. There are a lot of people who are on edge and angry all the time, and the slightest thing seems to set them off. All over the world, we are seeing spikes in domestic violence, and all over the world, we are seeing spikes in crime. Now, a spike does not necessarily portend a trend. And what the government is attempting to do is to intervene before what is a clear spike becomes a trend. So you put measures in place that are preemptory, that deal with what is happening, but are also preemptory in terms of trying to contain and limit the problem. I wish to congratulate our police for the work that they have done. Last year, crime was down significantly, particularly serious crimes, and I would wish to commend them for the effort that it had to have taken to get there. But we need to recognize that this is a problem from which the entire Caribbean society is suffering at this time. One country, and I'm not going to name them, has already had 1,400 murders for the year. A second country with quarter of the Barbados population, sir, quarter of the Barbados population has had 30 plus murders for the year. And a third country with 2/3 of the Barbados population has had 75 murders for the year. So that you can see that all over the Caribbean, the incidence of crime related to drug activity, related to gang activity, and related to gun violence is becoming a serious problem. But Barbados is still comparatively on the lower end of the spike that we are witnessing throughout the Caribbean. And this government is being proactive in taking measures, some of which I have outlined, that address this problem and seek to address it effectively. And I think we have to send a strong signal to criminals that they do not and cannot rule the day, and that we will not have them terrorizing a society, walking around, committing crimes, and then getting bail and coming out just to commit more. We are not going to have it. And that is the signal that the government, by this legislation, is sending. Sir, I want, in the 5 minutes remaining to me, though, to make... Sir, I have been monitoring the clock. I wish in the 5 minutes remaining to me, sir, to make the point that I do think, however, that there are wider measures which we need to do. I would like to see, as been talked about, a national mentorship program started so that every young person from maybe 13 years old can be put into a formal mentorship program with somebody else, almost like a Big Brother program, so that you can help to guide young people and to nurture the young people. I try, sir, and I mentor quite a few young people, and it is amazing some of the challenges they have in their homes, in their societies, coming out of school. It is their self-perception, their fears and concerns about the future, and their not understanding the choices that are available to them in a world that has so many more choices for them than we would have had as young people 20 or so years ago. I believe that we need to have a community-based program that encourages communities where we know that there are tensions and rival gangs. Sit down as stakeholders with various counselors, various people with training, and talk through some of the challenges and try to come to solutions. South Africa did something like it with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I still believe that there is enough goodwill in Barbados amongst a majority of people that we can effect a program of that sort. I'd like to see conflict resolution skills taught to young people, particularly to young men. Because a lot of what we have is young men seeking validation, young men seeking attention, young men seeking love. And when you speak to a lot of them, they tell you that they were never respected in their homes, that they were never loved in their homes, that their mother or grandmother didn't treat them well, that their mother was missing or their grandmother was missing. They didn't have anybody who taught them where, when, how. People were not sending them to Sunday school to get inculcate values. And people were not teaching them in the homes about the value of themselves, the value of life, the value of love and care. And therefore they got into negative social behavior because the first time they felt as if they belonged, the first time they felt a sense of connection and caring was on the streets. When they were liming, when they were bonding with other young men, some with the same problems as they had, or others who recognized that they could be easy victims, tools in their hand to get them to do things that are wrong and things that are evil and harm others. But the need to belong, to feel cared about, to feel like somebody and to feel important was so intense that even when they felt some sense of, this isn't so right, being part of something in which they were valued and in which they had a sense of respect became the primary driver for their actions. And that is a negative downward trend that we have to correct, that we have to address, that we have to redress. And it is not a matter for the government. It requires a whole of society response. Government is not abdicating its responsibility, but equally, the rest of the society cannot say government has to do something. The appropriate question for all of us at this time is how can we together put measures in place to save a society, to save a country, to pull back what is happening. Sir, I saw recently the way numerous people were prepared to vilify some school children who were a little over-enthusiastic at the end of the term. But these same people are not asking and did not pause to ask. They were going to investigate the teachers. The children should be punished. They did not ask, where did the children see this behavior? Whose behavior were they modeling? They did not ask, how do adults behave on cruises at night when you have actual sexual acts taking place on cruises and being recorded and broadcast? sent around via WhatsApp and on social media. That is where the problem starts. It doesn't start with the children. When the young man at 18 picks up a gun, the problem didn't start with him. It started earlier. And if we want to address the problem, the answer isn't lock up all the criminals. The answer is to try to understand what are the appropriate social interventions to address the rot that we are seeing at the center of our society that we have to deal with. So this is one of a number of measures that government is using to address the problem that requires a multidisciplinary approach. Our young men in particular need saving. They need saving. We've seen in the past, and I don't believe we should allow what we've seen to get further out of hand. And this is why this measure before this legislation, before the chamber today is so important. There was a time when alarm was raised about gangs rearing their heads in the country. The response of the government of the day was there were no gangs. When we had Campus Trends and the Kadooment Dare murder, the response of the day was silence. This administration is speaking about what is going on. This administration is taking action. This administration is attempting to act in defense and protection of the entire society and saying to the criminals, we are prepared to stand up for the citizens of this country. And I urge all members today, the legislation may not be perfect. At some point, it may be challenged by the courts, by somebody in the courts, but that is what the courts are there for. What we are here for is to stand on the side of the citizen. The little old lady who does not come out after a certain time anymore because the man who committed murder in her community that she passed by and saw the body bleeding on the road is still walking around free. The people who were traumatized at Sheraton Center will never forget the image, will never forget the image of what they saw. The people who wake up to the news that there's been another gun crime or somebody else has been stabbed, we are here to protect them. This legislation attempts to do that by saying to the criminals, we will not have your behavior. If you do certain things, you are staying behind bars once you commit a murder, once you use a firearm. And I implore every senator, even if the process is flawed, even if the legislation is not ideal, even if this is not exactly what you wanted to see, let us join together to do something to save our society and to save our country. I'm much obliged to you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Honour Senator Thompson. Before you rise to close the debate, Senator Blackman, Senator Thompson, just take the chair for a few minutes, please. Yes, please. Thank you kindly.
Senator Blackman.
Madam Deputy President, as I rise in concluding this afternoon, or today's rather, very important debate. We've heard from all of the speakers, from the government side, from the opposition, from the independent members alike. And what remains clear to me is that this bill, notwithstanding the fact that we've brought it here in a short time, it goes to the very heart of who we are as a people. And as I started this morning, I started on the premise that when you're elected to govern, and even if you're not elected, but you're part of the ecosystem of governance. We are mandated all to ensure that we do what is right for our people. And therefore, we are here because the circumstance of the day, as we've heard from speaker after speaker, bar none, is that we are here because the circumstance of the day requires us to act in the interest of all in our country, and in particular with respect to the situation on crime and serious criminal matters, murder, firearms. And therefore, as we look to close the debate on this bill, I just want to very, very briefly, in a few moments, just touch on one or two things that was raised today. As you've rightly heard, Madam Deputy President, issues of national security. No country, no international organization, no institution that has a mandate to protect its members or its citizens goes into the minutiae of such a strategy. You give broad strokes, but you also ensure that that strategy can have life, and on that basis, you don't go into any detail. And this, therefore, is in response to the query as to why we don't do that. And I also want to make it clear that as we look at the issue of what have we done on the preventative side, you've heard we've implemented the scanners in our ports, both the airport and seaport, and also measures have been taken to also include the private entries in our country. And why? In order to weed out and to reduce the numbers of illegal firearms coming into our country, this was necessary. But I also want to go on another side.
If you would pause, Senator, please, so that the President may return.
Please continue, Senator Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the preventative side, it also includes the government's commitment, which it has been doing and it continues to do, and will continue to do so, ensuring that our young people have access to greater opportunities in business, opportunities for mentorship, opportunities for access to training. You can think of the National Training Initiative. As members have also spoken, continued access to free tertiary education in our country. Because why? The devil finds work for idle hands. And therefore, we are implored to continue to create opportunities that will engage our young people's minds, their creativity, and ensuring that they can put their God-given skills to good use. You've heard of the Peace Program, and that continues to bear fruit across the country. And simply put, Mr. President, what I would want the public to take away from today's debate and discourse would be that we as a government are committed and have been committed, particularly also since coming to office in 2018, in fighting crime and fighting serious crime. And we will not, in the words of our former Minister of Health, we will not retreat, we will not surrender. And therefore, as we close today's debate, I simply want to implore all of us, every right-thinking Barbadian, every member of this chamber, government, opposition, independent senators alike, to give the bill the support. Because why? As you've heard, a gunshot knows no partisan lines. A family in mourning knows no partisan lines. And we have a moment in our history to ensure that we support this bill in the interests of our people. And therefore, long after this debate and bill is closed, we have to ensure that we now have a piece of legislation that has teeth, but equally, the job doesn't rest there. Whilst that's necessary, it isn't sufficient, as we've heard. We have to continue to ensure that on the preventative side, that we have the requisite tools to do what is necessary. So with those words, Mr. President, I beg to move that the bill be read a second time.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. Will those honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that your honor do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for the further consideration of the bill.
The question is that you now leave the chair and the Honorable Senate resolve itself in the committee for further consideration of this bill. Will those honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Senate is now in committee.
Madam Chair, permission to call the clauses in parts, please.
Permission granted.
Part 1, clauses 1 to 3.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that clauses 1 to 3 stand part.
Question is that clauses 1 through 3 do now stand part. Will
Madam
all
Chair,
honorable senators in favor?
Part 1, clauses 1 to 3. No, let him sit down. Let him sit. That's it, is Madam Chair's correction to me. Part 1, clauses 1 to 3.
The question is that Part 1, clauses 1 through 3 do now stand part. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. All honorable senators against please say no. The ayes have it.
Part 2, clauses 4 through 7.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that Part 2, clauses 1 through 7, 4 through 7, do stand part.
The question is that Part 2, clauses 4 through 7 do now stand part. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The question is that Part 2, clauses 4 through 7 do now stand part. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. No. The ayes have it.
Part 3, clauses 8 to 12.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that Part 3, clauses 8 to 12 do stand part.
The question is that Part 3, clauses 8 through 12 do now stand part. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it. Chair.
Part 4, clauses 13 to 18.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that Part 4, clauses 13 to 18 do now stand part.
The question is that Part 4, clauses 13 through 18 do now stand part. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. And those against, please say no. No. The ayes have it.
Part 5, clauses 19 through 28.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that Part 5, clauses 19 to 28 do stand part.
The question is that Part 5, clauses 19 through 28 do now stand part. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? No. The ayes have it.
Schedule.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that the schedule do not be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the schedule be now the schedule to the bill. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it. Report.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passing of one bill in committee. Senator Blackman.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The next the ayes have it. Senator Blackman.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Bill Act 2024.
Honorable senators, in this matter, we're required to vote individually rather than by a collection of voices. The I will place the question and the clerk will call your names and you will indicate your vote in an audible voice. The question is that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Bail Act 2024.
Senator, the Honorable Miss Lisa R. Cummings.
Yes.
Senator, the Most Honorable the Honorable Jerome Walcott.
Yes.
Senator, Dr. the Honorable Chantel Monroe Knight.
Yes.
Senator, the Honorable Chard Blackman.
Yes.
Senator, Dr. Crystal Haynes.
Yes.
Senator John King.
Yes.
Senator Patricia Paris.
Yes.
Senator Andrea Boyce.
Yes.
Senator Gregory Nichols.
Yes.
Senator Reverend Morris.
Yes.
Her Honor Elizabeth Thompson.
Yes.
Senator, the Honorable Lyndall Nurse.
Yes.
Senator Christopher Maynard.
Yes.
Senator Miss Monique Tate.
Abstain.
Senator Kevin Boyce.
Aye.
I didn't hear you.
Aye.
That's an aye? Aye? Okay. Aye. Senator Crystal Drakes.
Abstain.
Okay. Senator Andrew Malalo.
Yes.
Senator Miss Tricia Watson.
No.
Okay. Let me see. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah. Mr. President, the result of the voting stands as follows. 15 senators voted in favor, 1 voted no, and 2 abstentions. Therefore, the bill has reached a threshold of 2/3 of majority. That is 14 required for the passage of this bill, pursuant to question, Section 49 of the Constitution.
The clerk having reported that the yeses are 15, abstentions 2, noes 1, and meeting the 2/3 majority required according to our rules. I therefore declare that the bill is now so passed and so cited. Senator Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. This brings us to the end of government business for today. I want, as I close, to express appreciation for all honorable members who have spoken today and to wish everyone a good bank holiday weekend, bank holiday tomorrow, and a good weekend up ahead. I beg to move the adjournment of the sitting of the Senate. Sine die.
The question, before I put the question, let me wish everyone a happy Emancipation Day tomorrow and a happy Kadooment Day on Monday. Whatever you do and however you choose to celebrate Emancipation Day and our Kadooment, please do enjoy. Leave a little energy for when next you return to the Senate. The question is that the Honorable the Senate do now adjourn sine die. Will those honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. The sitting therefore stands adjourned. Sine die.